Hello everybody, welcome to the FSP podcast series. Today we'll be talking about connecting the intelligent enterprise through a data lens, talking about what it means to be an intelligent enterprise, dipping into customer experiences, talking about common pitfalls and how to accelerate your data journey. I'm Harleen and I'll be hosting today. I'm a data product lead at FSP.
Hi, I'm Lara Walker, a business intelligence engineer within the data and AI team.
Hi, I'm James. I've been at FSP about 3 years. I work on digital and data strategy with our customers. This is my second podcast, so I'm almost a pro. So really excited to be here today.
Hi, I'm Hrayr. I've been with FSP almost 5 years now. Started in a data and AI capability, helping our clients with their data journey, and currently holding the Chief Data Officer role at FSP, building our own data strategy for FSP.
Right, so we're going to start with defining an intelligent enterprise. So what we are looking at is the things we need to do to be an intelligent enterprise. So I'd like to invite Lara to share some thoughts on that.
Thanks, Harleen. When I think about an intelligent enterprise, what comes to mind is an organization that harnesses technology to leverage data, to remain agile and be able to adapt to things that happen in the industry. It often includes using technology to use data as something that's going to be strategic and help them achieve their business objectives. But what I find is that it's not just harnessing and leveraging technology. You don't just become an intelligent enterprise by investing in technology. There's a lot about the ways of working and behaviors of an organization. And it shouldn't just affect the decision makers as well. For it really to be embedded, it should trickle all the way down from decision makers all the way down to people on the ground as well.
Cool. It's quite interesting. Any other thoughts? James, any perspectives from your experiences?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, most of our customers are still at the point where most people in the business think data is someone else's problem. Hard for them to get the data they need. They don't think it's their responsibility to manage the data, to get value out of it. And actually, when you try and pin down who is responsible for the data, it can be really difficult. I think that data and doing better with data isn't in itself a sort of silver bullet for an organization's problems, but it is a great lens through which to see where the organization's at. And I think a fully intelligent enterprise is one where everybody is clear on how they leverage value from data, their ownership of the data, and instead of data being someone else's problem, data is your source of value. And I say your, like everybody's. A fully sort of data native organization. And I don't know if I should try and coin a term, but for me, it's almost a level on from data driven, is one where all the people are involved in creating value and understand how to use data to do that. All of the manual things have been completely automated, and partly with AI. And AI sort of is data, lives in the world of data, so that's fully data native. So a fully intelligent enterprise is one where data stops being IT's problem, someone else's problem.
Yeah, quite interesting actually. We'll pick up on data-driven as well. Any other thoughts, Hrayr?
Yeah, I think I would like to bring a little bit of kind of a human factor to that. And probably during the podcast, we'll talk a lot about bringing analogy from our personal life into professional life as well. And I truly believe, and sometimes kind of challenge myself and people that I work with, because I think in our personal life, we are quite data-driven to some degree. So like the way that we manage our household, I think most of the people I talk to, we are quite data-driven. We use data to get some insight. We kind of analyze that, do whatever we need to do next, whether it is your next holiday, whether it is maintenance of your car or whatever. But I think that gets lost most of the time gets lost as soon as you go into the professional life, and you're still talking about the same person, right? So, and I think that's where understanding the causes why we are data-driven in our personal life, but maybe not that much in our professional life, and where the priority should be to embed that culture of like, whether you want to get an insight from your data to kind of validate your decisions, whether you need to improve some stuff around your operations using data. I think that there are elements that are sometimes less about the technology and everything that we know about data management, and more about kind of just challenging some basic stuff and putting priorities around clarity, around what you want to measure, wherever you are. Because in your professional world, again, you are an individual sitting in a team. Teams make departments. Departments make capabilities. Capabilities makes an organization. So if everyone starts to think about through this lens, I think the priorities will start to clarify what and where we want to invest in.
Yeah, really interesting. I think we've all touched on sort of data-driven to some extent, and I think Hrayr summarised it pretty well. We do it all in our day-to-day lives. What are your views on the journey over the sort of last 10, 15 years? Obviously, being data-driven has accelerated, mainly through technology, access to data, timeliness of data. We see in our day-to-day lives, right? Everything's at our fingertips. How has that changed for organizations, do you think? Why do you think we are more data-driven perhaps in our day-to-day lives than organizations?
I'll touch on that. If I reflect on the organisations that I've been involved with over the last 4 years, I've seen a lot of changes. I think to James's point earlier around being so dependent on the IT team, data is often really siloed. If you compare that to the data that we use in our day-to-day lives, it's at our fingertips, so it's easy to access and it's trustworthy and it's right in front of us, compared to organisations that are reliant on 3 people in the IT team to surface data for them. The data might not be of good quality and they're depending on an individual doing that manual process on a month-to-month basis. So that's the main struggle that I've seen. There's also been obviously the big push when people use terms that are quite cringy around like data is the new oil. So there's a big push around people expecting or kind of having that pressure from their industry to say that they'll fall behind or be set or not be competing with the people in their industry if they don't use data. And I think that pressure has kind of put organizations into reacting and being really tactile rather than being strategic and zooming out and thinking, okay, what is good for my organization? They're just thinking, I've got some budget, I need to do it now, otherwise I'm going to fall behind. So I would say the main 2 kind of challenges and how it's going to change moving forward is not being siloed and allowing data to be useful for everybody in every single role that they have across the things that they do day to day. And it really not just being on the decision makers as well. Like it is in our everyday lives, it needs to be accessible for all.
I think that's a really good point. So I think even if you go back to sort of the 1980s, there's a trend right the way from there to now, which is around there being more data and it being easier to get hold of and use. And basically, the more data you have, the more your information that supports your organisation, whatever you're trying to do, is the more accessible it is, the easier to use it is, the more of it you have, the more you can do with it. So data is really powerful, and it lets you enable automation. It lets you get more insights than were ever possible before. So that's really been that overarching trend, exactly as Lara said. How do we get more of our data more easily accessible?
Yeah.
And I think just to add to what Lara and James said, if you ask like why the applications in your personal life are so easy to use and why you use, and I think there is, especially when you look at data from kind of analytical angle, there is a bit of voluntary opt-in to use these applications, especially in your professional life, because like if you can ask, what if I don't use that, right? What if I don't use the next report or dashboard about my sales or marketing? What is going to happen? And if you kind of compare that to, let's say, some of your day-to-day operations, whether it is your HR portal, your CRM, your document management, your intranet, you kind of have to use that. So you kind of have to adopt that to operate on a day-to-day basis. But when it comes to data-informed decisions, there is an element of opting into that, and to get that buy-in, this application should be that simple to use for them. Otherwise, the threshold of tolerance is very low otherwise. But if you look kind of in your personal life, these applications, they are not simple applications either. Your digital banking application, your energy provider application, they deal with lots of data to give the insight that you are after. I think the reason why it works, because it's kind of the shared understanding, the shared concept between the producer of that application and the consumer, all the way down to the developer level who worked on that application. That developer is also using that application on a day-to-day basis. So it makes the whole kind of the story so simple and understandable by everyone, which completely is getting lost in professional and in corporates, in big enterprises and things like that. And I think that's where that simplicity, shared understanding is very, very important to drive a little bit within the organizations being data informed. And that's where the main difference is. But by no means the applications in our personal lives, they are not dealing with small amounts of data, or they are not solving simple issues. They are solving much more complex solutions and problems. But they just do that because pretty much everyone in that chain, from the developer to the product owner, from the consumer, they all kind of have a shared understanding of why this app has been built and how they're going to use that for their day-to-day household management.
But you still see a big gap between the ones who do it really well and the ones who don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is around focusing on the people and the end user experience.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I mean, that's why I think always, and we probably will talk a bit later about this, the repetitive pattern is you start your data strategy in organization by fully focusing on foundations and technologies and difficult stuff, rather than you really need to challenge that status quo, saying why we need this, or what would happen if we don't have our analytical platform at all. So let's switch off, and then start to pick up some use cases where either it is an opportunity or a liability issue that is going to solve, and drive from that angle, rather than very quickly create highly expensive cost center that in 6 to 12 months will be quite visible within organization of not delivering value.
Yeah, and just mentioning that chain, so sort of the data value chain, I think in our day-to-day lives, we are, as consumers, right at the end of that, where we're looking at where we're experiencing the impact of a high investment usually. What are the sort of key influences that we can use within the organizations that we work with to help sort of drive more investment earlier on in that data value chain, in terms of curating that data, transforming it? Because obviously, as Lara mentioned right at the beginning, it's the quality of the data that is really going to drive the impactfulness of it. So just from experiences, what are the kind of things that we can be doing to help influence more value from that data chain?
Just on that topic, Harleen, I'm going to come back to your point, Hrayr, around making sure that you've got good use cases that are going to impact positively the users or the people who are going to use the product that's built. Because I think sometimes, especially when it's a data strategy or something that mainly people in the C-suite are talking about, there's a big gap or disconnect between what they think is the right thing to do and what's actually going to impact people in their day-to-day lives. When we think about the data products that we use in our personal lives, we're at the end of the value chain, we're using it, it's impactful for us. The people who would have designed that would have thought, how is this going to be an app that someone is going to use on a day-to-day basis? But in the customers that I've been involved with, I think some of the decision makers are doing what they think is right, and by the time we spend quite a few months doing the development, when it gets to the users, they're fine with their original way of working. It doesn't add value, or it makes their way of working more complicated. Training is something that's also sometimes seen as an oversight. So yeah, by the time it gets to the user, they're like, why would I spend 3 weeks trying to learn how to use something that's not going to positively impact me? So I think it's very important to listen to the users and think what's actually going to change their lives positively, because if you want to embed something and they're going to make that's going to have long kind of lasting impact for your business, you need to actually engage with the people who are going to use it.
Really good point. I think that goes back to your intro, where one of the first things you mentioned was ways of working. And often we do see sort of silos. Again, you mentioned sort of data teams working in silos, and the importance of bringing sort of other skills and resources along early on in that journey. So I think what are the other skills that you think are complementary to having, data specialists to add the value early?
I mean, gosh, there's so many.
But
If you want to really unlock access to data in that way, you've got to break it out of the silos, which are often, they reflect your IT architecture. And you need to sort of bridge that gap between where the data is siloed away and locked away and what people really need. So you need quite a few skill sets for that. I mean, you're probably better at this than I am, Harleen, but you've got to have those IT technical skill sets around getting the data out. You've got to have the skill sets around what users really need, those sort of UX and human-centered design skills.
But there's
and you've got
also
to put them
the
together in the
training
right
element
way.
as well, right?
Oh, yeah,
The
for end
whole-
users on how you actually use this stuff. Yeah,
the adoption.
But you know what my experience is? Once you give end users the data and the tooling, whether it's Tableau or Power BI or whatever it is, they're really good at thinking about how to use the data. The trick is to get it to them. And yes, you do have to give them some training and get them started. But I don't think, we talk a lot about digital and data literacy. I don't really see the end users as being the biggest challenge here a lot of the time, as long as you sort of engage with them in the right way. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, and I think I'll probably just refer a couple of recent conversations and podcasts that I was following. So we had executive breakfast yesterday with some of our clients and the data leaders within our clients' ecosystem, as well as there was a really good podcast a couple of weeks ago that I've listened to. And there was some repetitive patterns that can drive some of the success. And one of the things that, again, kind of doing in a balanced way and sometimes challenging the traditional status quo is also important. And in my head, it is, we always talk about data culture, data literacy, but it's very difficult to take the whole business and make them data literate. There is also a quick win, relatively quick win, is thinking that your data team should be quite business focused as well. So, and that's where I think the example that we have given around why our applications on day-to-day basis are so easy to use, again, because the developer understands what they are building. Sometimes in many organizations, it turns into multi-layer requirements gathering, requirements writing, and then a data professional, whoever that professional is, an engineer or BI engineer or data analyst, scientist, whoever it is, they just follow the script to build a product rather than they understand what they are building. So I think and this is coming back to agenda for the data leaders. Yes, it's good to train your business to become data literate, data informed, whatever terminology you want to use. But I think it's equally important to have somewhere in your agenda that your own data professionals should be quite business friendly. So go to any big team, a data team, and ask the BI developers how many of them know, let's say, basics of the finance or basics of P&L or basics of these kind of end products or basics of ESGs. So when they produce the end products, at least they can understand, if I was on the business side, someone even at junior level, would I understand all this? And bringing this together is quite important. Other couple of things is and probably again we will evolve on this. Everyone says data is an asset, right? How many businesses have put a value tag on that? And there are, which is really good, there are organizations that's starting to put value tag on that. And then it becomes really good cornerstone for communications, saying this is our asset as our office. Right? So for example, or as a building. So you can have the best office, but if no one is going there, yes, maybe you have an asset of 100 million, but you are driving zero benefits of that. The same mindset should be for the data as well. And there are some frameworks to put a value tag on your data. Put the value tag and then start to drive the benefits. And that will pretty much push that across the consumers to the developers.
So James, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, loads. I put so many things in there, but I mean, one of the things just on the last subject is you can't put a value tag on things that you haven't identified. You don't know what you've got. You don't know who's responsible for them. So I think there's quite a lot of basics that I don't see many organisations having done before you even get to trying to put a value tag on it. And even at quite a basic level, just knowing what's where. And what the rules are around that and who makes those rules is really valuable for all sorts of digital transformation. Because we've been quite analytics, sort of BI focused in the conversation so far, but actually the data is fundamental to all your digital transformation, building digital twins, doing AI, automation, workflow, whatever you want, just governance and compliance. It's all about data. So, just having that basic catalogue of what are your data assets and who's responsible for them is actually surprisingly powerful. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it can be hard to actually nail down the people. So, I think that's really interesting.
But isn't there a bit of chicken and egg situation that to be able to do that, you need to get the buy-in of the business to do that?
And sometimes to get the
buy-in to do that, you need to say, look, we have an asset worth of whatever. We need to look after this. We need to get value out of this. So, like, again, a great example yesterday in that executive breakfast was like, if you walk into your office and you see a broken window or a broken coffee machine, you would report that straight away, right? But how many have reported a missing critical data fields in your CRM or in your document management system? That's kind of the mindset. And when you start to put you're not treating your asset worth of 100 million or 50 million or whatever it is, it's kind of put a slightly different perspective on to get the buy-in or to sometimes even to enforce some of these practices.
I'm not sure there's a universal way to solve this problem because, like you say, it is a bit chicken and egg in the general sense. In most organisations, there typically is a starting point where you can go, it's really clear that this data is not being managed in a joined up enough way, and that's causing business problems today. Or there's an existing strategy where the data needs to support that. So you need to establish that ownership. In other places, you're right, maybe it is a different strategy around trying to understand that value first. Sorry, there was the other point you made before that I wanted to come back to as well.
Sure.
Do you mind if I just do that?
I don't mind, James. Go for
it. We were talking about how you get that aligned understanding of the business value and the data really all being about the business, which I totally agree with. I was going to throw in another concept. It's more of a software development one, but there's this idea that in software development that the software you build, the IT you build, reflects the organisation that's building it. It's called Conway's Law. It's been around for a long time. And there's some fairly good evidence from that, from what I remember. I think the same is true around data, right? If you don't get the right structures and processes in place for how you build your data products, and that's a term we've not thrown in yet, but it's quite important to this, then you tend to build stuff, as you were saying, that doesn't really do what people need. I was actually having a chat with someone outside FSP the other day where they were saying they ended up in this conversation with their IT department around building this this Power BI dashboard, and they were on this call with, I don't know how many people on, sort of 10 people on or something, and they're asking, is this what's needed? And they said, well, I don't understand why we need this in Power BI. Why can't we do it in Excel? And they said, oh, well, Power BI is much better. And they said, but what's the business requirement? And then they realised there was no one from the business there, which is a nice example of how if you don't get the right approach, you're just going to build something that's not very valuable or solves the wrong problem, and then people don't use it. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. I think, this idea around getting the right structures, it's actually organisational design and process in place for how you work with data. That's key to getting high-value data that everyone sees value in.
Comes back to my point earlier around investing in technology that you may not need or might not need it at your stage in the data journey. So in that example there, someone thinking, Power BI is the right thing to do, but cannot explain why, is a really big thing where people are just doing things that they feel pressured by the industry to do, right? I think wanted to bring up your point as well, Hrayr, around making sure that data professionals have a foot in the business as well, because I think sometimes you can fall into a trap of, again, wanting to do what you think is best in terms of best practice or industry standards of this is a product that I should design that's going to help the business. If you're not speaking to the users or the people whose problems you're trying to solve, you're not even aware of the problems that you're trying to solve with the product that you're building, there's a big disconnect there. And I think the challenges that can come from that is that maybe the decision makers at the top are thinking they've invested so much money into this data journey or strategy, and when they speak to the users, there's no value add because there's a disconnect not now between the C-suite C-suite and the end users, but between the developers and the people who are going to actually use it. So I think, definitely agree to your point around you can't just be have a good technology skill set to be a good data professional, because data is in the business, is embedded. You need to understand.
Pretty much having that empathy to the business.
Exactly.
And again, bringing another, like, I think it always helps bringing some real life example and then projecting that back to the business, like a couple of minutes on that. But I have tried so many times to start going to gym or to start running. It's not my thing, but I keep on trying, right? And every time in the past...
You still thrash me at tennis, though.
In the past, every time I would go and buy all possible equipments, all possible membership, the best one, saying, okay, I have now commitment to that. So that's the cost, right? Yeah. And that's where the balance starts to go away, because the chances that I will give it up again in a couple of months' time is very high. So, or take, let's say, running. So I can go and buy all possible running equipment and the shoes and the watches and all this stuff. But like, if your goal is just to attend a marathon for that year, and that's it, you are done, you are going back to whatever sport you are doing, then your investment should look something different to, let's say, for any reason, you are now committing, whether it is health issues or whatever, that you need to do multiple years, that you really need to be your lifetime goal. So in that case, yes, invest. In that case, invest in the best shoes, in all possible, whatever you want to do. So I think, and that's where, again, in the business, giving to your example, sometimes it could be like, you basically don't even need the platform. You don't need this next difficult thing. What you need is just kind of getting the insight that you're after. So keeping that balance, I think, is quite important.
I think sticking on the gym analogy, because I like gym as well, and I also suffer from the same problem. I'll invest and then not see the value. But there is something there about the gym analogy, which is you do a bit and you see results and you see value soon. So if a coach said to you, well, you can gym for a year, and after a year, you're going to see the value at that point, you're probably not going to be too invested. So if we think about the journey and sort of data as a product and data products, James mentioned that, and bringing that together into sort of methodologies that are commonly used. So recently, we've seen a bit of a transition from waterfall through to agile and agile teams, and bringing in some of the challenges we've spoken about around silos and removing silos, and creating probably things like cross-functional teams, multidisciplinary teams. Do you think agile works for data products? Is that something that you've seen work in some of the areas you've worked in some organizations? Has that helped to cultivate more of a data native or data driven culture, because organizations and leaders are able to see the value of data sooner?
I would say that no methodology is obviously perfect, but I've been in my time at FSP, I've done or agile-like projects, and I think the benefits there are that you get loads of different people speaking more often. Yeah. And when I say loads of different people, it's different skill sets. So it's obviously the development team, the technical side, but also you're engaging with the business. So things that you would that would take months, or getting to as far as stages of UAT, which could be months and months in a waterfall methodology, you're spotting and talking about in 3 days through your Scrum calls. So I think that is a real benefit, and having more people from different skill sets on the team. Another benefit I've seen is that you get to see value quicker. Just because it's less work in a quicker, kind of more intense time. So you're able to show the users or people within the business, does this look good? Is this what you're after? Which again, kind of doing waterfall when a developer hiding away for months on end, sometimes you wouldn't see something. And again, when we're talking about investing money, you get to see the output of your money sooner. So I think that's kind of a better way to do it, rather than investing money into something that it might not be worthwhile. You get to see the outcome sooner, and then if you need to pivot and change for the longer term and to have long lasting value, then again you're doing that at a quicker stage. So just catching those hurdles before you trip over them, I'd say.
Good points. From your experiences, obviously James and I worked in different industries, different sectors. From your experiences working with clients and organizations, have you seen sort of the adoption of sort of ways of working or moving towards sort of agile methods, multidisciplinary teams being one of the barriers to sort of seeing a return on investment of data?
I think agile for the data will work as it will work for any other engineering part. So for me, it's not big difference whether we are talking about agile in software engineering, where you are delivering your digital solutions, or whether you are building your data products. And that's why important, I think, when we use the terminology data product, and lots of organizations use that, but almost all of them struggle to articulate what is data product, because I think we can articulate what is digital solution or what is IT application, and then we can bring that product ownership and methodologies to wrap that delivery of that product. But I think the shared understanding of what is data product in any organization, I think you ask different people, you will get lots of different answers. Is the data product my final report? Is the data product my curated data sets, or actually my source aligned raw data is also data product? And I think the first thing to do for me, you always can revisit based on the organization you are, whether you are waterfall or agile. There is no one answer to that. But to me, it's start with the basics, come up with the real and very simple schema definition of what is data product. And you can start very small. You can say, we are going to support as an organization only 2 or 3 types of data product. That's it. That's how we're going to start that. And it can be BI specific, it can be highly curated data set specific. Start with that, bring that product mindset to your data strategy, and then start to add some more data products or types of data products that you can support. Now, whether you will deliver that agile way or waterfall, I think that's a second problem. For me, it's have that clear definition, you're going to agile for what you're going to deliver, what is going to be that final product, and having a clear definition on that definitely will help, and should come with all the standard stuff that comes with any digital solution. So how you going to make sure it's business fit and technical fit, because that will also drive then, does this bring value, and is this built in a way that we can kind of support that from IT perspective, bringing that data governance and everything else. But what is my product? What is my assessment to make sure that it's business fit? What is my assessment to make sure that it is technical fit? And then drive everything else from there.
Yeah, I think with products, it's quite interesting. I think defining your data products, I think that itself it's quite a grey area. So the way I've often thought about it is sort of project versus product. A project will end. A product won't. A product has a sort of ongoing life. It will evolve. It will change. So I think even before you start to define those, I think you just need to accept, or organizations need to sort of accept that we're not doing a data transformation project. We're on a journey to improve data, and that's not going to end. It's going to evolve. I don't know, from your experiences, James, is that something that you've seen work in sort of organizations?
Well, sometimes, but not that often. And I think it works in pockets, and people tend to have to try it to start learning about how to do this. There's not many organizations who think in a product-like manner. Mm-hmm. There are some. I've actually got a customer who thinks about their product breakdown structures and is quite product-centric overall in the organization, but not really in this space around data and IT, which is interesting. But I think, much as Hrayr was saying, the problems in this space aren't different to the rest of digital. If you want to be product-centric and do agile, they're normally the right direction of travel for most digital problems, but you can't really do them in a silo. Yeah. So, I'm thinking about a customer Lara and I worked on last year, where we were trying to work in an agile way, and we did. And the key advantage there is that it adds a lot more structure than just a dashboard developer sitting down with a user and building stuff, and then you've got no control over it. How do you manage that from a structured delivery perspective? Well, agile gives you that structure, and the product layer over the top really helps put it in business terms and maintain that focus on end users and why you're doing it, and on a long-term sustainable way, as you were saying. But then if the rest of the IT department doesn't work like that, and you can't go and quickly get what you need in terms of data, then when you get a new need coming through that sort of funnel of product development, then you have to wait 3 months and go back through an old-fashioned demand process, and then they go, sorry, we've got no budget to help you with that till next year. So if the rest of the organisation isn't on that journey, then trying to do agile and be product-centric can work to an extent, but then you hit a lot of blockers and dependencies. So partly, how do you get access to the data? How do you get changes made in the IT environment? If they haven't got a really sort of good, responsive demand and delivery process there, something that's agile-like, we could start talking about DevOps, all those sorts of things, then you're going to hit blockers, and you need to be realistic about that. And similarly, from a sort of budgeting and contracting point of view, if you've got suppliers, could be consultancies, outsourcers, other third parties, and the model of contracting you've got with them is not flexible, and they're managing some of your data, or you're reliant on them to do something with it, then again you're going to hit those same sorts of blockers and dependencies when you're into an old-fashioned life cycle. So I think that's where this stuff sort of breaks down. It's the right direction of travel, but too much of how we operate isn't digital in that sense. It's not product centric and agile. So you do need to think about that and be realistic when you're promising fast returns and quick results to your stakeholders. Exactly. I think most of us have been there where we think, we know this is possible, but if you're not in control of all the moving parts to line up around that, then you get stuck. And that's often the thing that us sort of data true believers forget when we're getting more passionate with the data is the realities of delivery.
And one of the other traps that sometimes you find yourself falling in often and often is like the notion of quick wins, which is good by itself, but if it is not aligned to your overarching where you're going to get to, then you're actually doing more harm than good. So sometimes in some initiatives, the buy-in you're getting by like, let's do a quick win, let's just show art of possible, let's just do this prototype or proof of concept or MVP, whatever it is, which is good as long as it somewhere adds a small piece to your overall strategy. If you're just doing that to excite someone, but then you don't have the whole story, then you're making that audience a lot more upset rather than kind of helping them with their journey. So all these terminologies or tricks that are being used, I think they need to be aligned with what you're going to do in a long run and how it is adding to that, rather than just showing art of possible of the next really good report.
You definitely need to keep an eye on the big picture, don't you?
Exactly.
Why you're doing this.
Yeah.
And in order to sort of think big, so you don't waste time and effort, and you build the right thing, and your quick wins add value and build towards something, and act small, so you see the regular feedback to the end users, and you build that excitement. I actually think doing that is not easy, and it requires quite a lot of thought around how you're going to organise yourselves, so that all of the right stakeholders are involved at the right times. You've got that aligned understanding, thinking and vision, that sort of thread through from, as you were saying with your personal banking analogy, right from the kind of business strategy through to the end user. Building that's the sort of secret sauce, really, isn't it? If you can do that in an organisation, everything else starts flowing from it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think sometimes, again, if you use another real life example, if you see a trailer of a movie, you want to eventually see the movie. And I think with a quick win, if nothing's coming, it's a great way to get buy-in. But if nothing's coming, you're waiting. Users are waiting. Yeah, there's no movie. The budget's gone for the movie. Then you're going to be worse off than where you were before the quick win. I think that's often sometimes what we see is a quick win is great to get excitement, to people understand the idea of what you're trying to do. But as you said, if you don't zoom out and see the bigger picture, as you said, James, it's just isolated and disjointed. So I think, again, it comes back down to that pressure of thinking we need to add value, we need to see data as a strategic asset and all the stuff we hear all the time. But if you don't spend that crucial time, I guess, behind closed doors and actually think, okay, what does good look like for this organisation across the year, across 2 years, or just zoom out and see the bigger picture, then a quick 6-month stint is going to do more damage than just taking a step back and thinking and zooming out.
Don't you think leadership's really important here? I was just thinking about it because we've not really touched on that. We've sort of talked about end users for sure and sort of the shifts you need in the organisation. maybe touched on culture, but not been that explicit about it. But I was just thinking, you really need that strong leadership here for people to achieve all these things we're talking about, getting that thread through from sort of top to bottom and front to back to join all this stuff up. And I think also you need that culture of valuing end user experience, right? You've got to see that as absolutely vital. Otherwise, you can't join all these things together, can you?
Yeah. But so building on that, what are the key roles? We obviously have Hrayr here as our Chief Data Officer at FSP, which is a role we didn't have going back. So obviously we are looking at that. FSP has a data strategy now. Even in the data and AI team, we're sort of building internal initiatives to that are underpinned by the data strategy, which is great. So thank you, Hrayr. But what are the kind of key roles in an organization, thinking about leadership, that we really need to have in place to drive and create that thread through an organization? What would you say?
I think if I kind of start to think about the key ingredients that will make the success, to me, it's, again, as I mentioned, it's always right to left. So unless there is a very compelling use case, unless there are very meaningful metrics and measures that you can define, which in my opinion is the job of the leader's hierarchy within the business. So wherever you are sitting and whatever program or team you're running, you need to have a meaningful metrics in a balanced way. So like you don't need to overcomplicate, but like at least your top 3-5 metrics, KPIs, what you are after, right? And then pretty much start to create a bit of like a hierarchy of these metrics within your chain of line management. So that is a role that has nothing to do with the data professionals, but unless that is somehow embedded, even in some parts of the business, investing in other technical roles is a bit too early. So get that right. Get your kind of that metrics-driven approach, your mindset, having some really compelling metrics and being able to articulate why you are measuring these metrics. So like, again, coming back, like, what about if you don't know how that particular metric is behaving, right? So sometimes you can see, I don't know, maybe in marketing world or number of followers have been increased by put whatever number. So like, so what? So like if you start to tell like what it has changed in our business or what would happen if we didn't know that we have got additional 200 followers or whatever, right? So having that metrics that drive some actions clearly written somewhere is a good first starting point. The second one, as a leader, and especially in technology and data leadership, you need to acknowledge the need of experimentation as well. The best way that you can evaluate whether product is fit for purpose is by experimenting with that. So, and there are always the usual problems like having an access to production-like data, having a secure access, security concerns, everything like that. So the best ideas will come from the business. And if you give them some channel of experimentation in a safe way, that's kind of, to me, is one of the key ingredients that as a data leader, when you think about the foundations, think about, can you give them self-hosted experimental environment rather than self-hosted BI, self-service BI, self-service experimentation. Can you enable that for your business users and start to think about that way? What roles you would start to keep centrally, what roles you will start to allow the business to experiment with that data. And there is nothing wrong to start with fully centralized model, having all the roles in one place, and then slowly starting to outsource maybe analyst roles, BI role, to the business, but thinking about metrics, self-service experimentation, environments is kind of where I would start if I was kind of leading up any data transformation work.
Cool. And with data leadership, right? So obviously you're going to have somebody near the top of the organization, probably a C-suite role, who's very excited by data, but how do we cultivate sort of cultures or mindsets that make data exciting? Because at the moment we've spoken a lot about the things we need to do to, bring data alive in organizations, but how do we make people excited about data all the way through from, C-suite down to sort of those data analyst roles, the data governance roles, data stewards, and all of those sort of operational roles? What makes data exciting?
Look, I think it's almost the wrong question. Look, if people care about their business, they'll care about the data, right? Data is all about the business, and I have yet to find a single end user who, if they care about what they do, doesn't care about their data. So do you not agree? I mean,
Absolutely.
I really, really feel this. I mean, yeah, in every organisation, you get people who are a bit disengaged, who do it because that's their job and they have to do it. But, most people, they want to do a better job. They want to focus in their job on the bits that are interesting and add value, not on getting data out of email and putting it in Excel and emailing it off to someone else and worrying about whether they've copied and pasted correctly, right? So that's been my experience, is that end users do care about the data really deeply. And if they don't, then you've probably got a broader issue in your organisation. I mean, if you mean sort of slightly differently, how do you get people to see the value of investing in data?
That's probably the question.
Yeah, that's a much harder question. I don't know. What do you think about that one?
It's a difficult one, as you said, and I agree with you. Kind of, most people care about doing good work, and the analogy is like, why you care using in personal life the same way you need to care. But I think there is a bit of difference in that, because in your personal life it hits directly your finances, your day-to-day opportunities. It gets lost within the business. So sometimes, yes, naturally, most of the employees want to do the best job, but how easy they can articulate what the good looks like for their role, for their team role, for their capability role. Is there that clarity that says, for us as a small team, or as a wider department, or as a wider organization? I think that's where the leadership should make it very clear, saying this is what the good looks like. So how you can contribute to this, how you can measure to that one. That will kind of use that care to the point.
And that's about storytelling, right?
Exactly.
So, it's like any other transformation. If you want people to see things differently, you've got to help them understand how it's going to make their lives better in some way. And storytelling is basically the most powerful way to do that. For a lot of people, actually working more effectively with data, having a more intelligent enterprise that's data-driven, it's actually very empowering. Suddenly there's a load of really boring stuff you don't have to do anymore. Instead of having to wait for days, weeks to get answers from people, it's just there. So your life becomes easier. That's often that's at the root of exciting people around data, is you're going to be able to do your work more easily, make your life's going to be better because you make better decisions, and it's going to be easier to work with your colleagues. So,
good point. I think the key there is bringing data into roles and responsibilities, especially sort of in the leadership roles, middle management layers, so that becomes they have an onus to, and an interest, a genuine interest in increasing productivity, essentially, efficiencies.
So I was just going to say that I think it's twofold in a way to excite your users, because data is exciting, and I don't think that's even like a nerdy or geeky.
We're data geeks, so what we say.
Says the BI engineer.
I don't think it's a nerdy or geeky thing to say that data is exciting. I think normal people would say that. They just probably don't understand what data is. I think people would say that data is exciting. And I think it's two-pronged, because one side of it is to what you were saying, James, around automating things, spending your time doing things that need a human to do, and leaving technology to do the stuff that's going to happen every single month, and it's a routine task. So that, I think, is exciting because it gives you more time to invest into other things. But also it's then having data at your fingertips to delve into it and actually use it as a way to measure how you're doing, how you're performing. I think back to your point earlier, Hrayr, everybody has something in their job that they can measure. Is it, I need to get +5 on my headcount for next year? How many people are in my team now? When should I start recruiting? Do I want to invest more into ESG? Do I know what our carbon footprint is as an organisation? In anybody's role, there is something that you can measure, and I think data is really empowering because it lets you know where you're at now and also where you want to be and how to get there and keep measuring. So I think to your point, Hrayr, around what can you measure? There's something in everybody's role.
But also, if you add, like, if you talk to most of the employees, kind of their core values, what they look in their workplace, learning is always there, right? So, and regardless where you sit, you are early years of your career, you're highly experienced, learning is always part of normal behavior, right? So, and the way you can learn is sometimes just to validate your thoughts or your decisions or your knowledge against the facts. So like, okay, I always repeat these decisions, I always do this, and kind of feels that I'm doing the right thing. Should I look at that? Should I just ask the data to validate that and then find out that actually I can improve something? So that bringing back to that, do you want to learn in your job? Yes, you do. There are some specific stuff that you want to learn, but also as a professional, just validating how good your kind of decision-making process and the knowledge and kind of how you take the actions. I think data is there to help, and that's where kind of bringing that human factor to data rather than just saying data can help you be more efficient kind of doesn't stick, but giving that proper stories within personalized context, I think is very important, and how you communicate that within the business. I think it's a decent task for data leader rather than what is the next vendor we need to bring, because technology vendors are there. You will not have a problem to solve the case that you want to solve. Even if you
just
fail,
to say 90% of data problems, it doesn't matter if you use the Azure data platform, Google, Palantir. It doesn't, like most business needs around data. It doesn't matter about the technology. It's all these other things. I think I was just going to throw in, just for building on what Hrayr was saying, connecting it back to your earlier question, because we didn't explicitly say this. I think if you want to sort of scale impact around data, the sort of business change element is really important. And I think that's an undervalued skill set that's often not used enough. You know, really understanding how you're going to take people on that sort of through that change process. You know, people who are really good at that has a huge impact on turning a leader's vision into impact throughout the business. So I think when you want to start scaling what you're doing with data, a structured business change approach is really important. In terms of those roles and skills. Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on to sort of pitfalls. Where have you seen data go wrong in organizations? What were the reasons for it? Why didn't it take off? Where did things fall apart? Just to give our listeners some context as to the potholes and pitfalls they should be avoiding.
Okay, I'll start.
Anonymized,
a lot that I can talk on this topic. You need to acknowledge that it is an expensive thing to do. So you very quickly can make the business upset by investing a lot in the areas that actually are not the core areas to bring the value in. So like if as a data leader, your agenda is like initial days, like focusing on which vendor you are going to bring in, which technology you are going to bring in, bring this at scale without having the use cases that we talk about. Yes, you probably will have initial investments, but probably you will run out of that very quickly, making people upset. So I think change the priorities to me is like delay the technology, delay that build stuff until there is a full clarity of what you're going to deliver. And secondly, there are many things to kind of mention, but second, again, repetitive pattern for me is like, so the first one is I call a technology trap. So like you just go down of building the best technology that, I don't know, does real-time analytics, real-time ingestion, all this fancy stuff. But like, so what if I turn that off today? Is someone going to suffer from that? No. Second is, be very clear on terminology and really simplify that. Again, there are so many different meanings of everyone talks about data product. What is data product? So everyone talks about data governance. What is data governance? So try to kind of be very clear and very concise on what terminology you are going to use and how you can educate people to use a very small subset of terminology when they talk about data, and basically keep it as simple as you can. As I said at the beginning, this is an area that, especially from the analytical needs, people are going to opt in to use. So, and they are going to do that on top of their day-to-day work. So if you make that anywhere remotely difficult, they will just try and abandon. So don't complicate, keep it really simple, baby step. Just make that environment where the main feedback is, I get this, I want more, or I get this is missing. That's a good problem to have, because you kind of have proven the value and you just need to scale and always keep that balance, rather than, this is complex, I don't get it, I'm lost, can you say again? So I think that's where should be the main focus of the mistakes to avoid.
Raising the awareness.
Yeah.
Cool. Any others, Lara? Any bits you've observed?
I was going to say, it comes down to making sure you have the right people in your team to do the development. But I think what is also overlooked is like the support and maintenance piece as well. So again, if you do a really good job, build a good product that people really like, if there's issues in there, or if something goes wrong, or users start using it and they have questions, there needs to kind of be that buffer around support and maintenance, or even it comes down to change as well. I need help. There kind of needs that post-development life cycle, what that looks like, needs to be established and not forgotten about, because I think people get really excited around quick wins, as you were saying earlier, around I just want to get something live, I want to get something over the line. But what does that look like after things have gone live? I think that's really important and sometimes overlooked. And then that's a really easy way to your buy-in will crumble because people have got problems as soon as something's gone.
It
live.
comes back to the project as product, isn't it? You don't once a data project or your reporting is delivered, and whoever's built it, it's no longer their job to own it. If you don't have a product owner or a data product owner, a report owner, no one's looking after and nurturing that product or the reporting, and it loses relevance. And as soon as it loses relevance, it loses value. So that's a really good point. I've observed that in a few areas. James, things to avoid?
Hard to add to what Lara and Hrayr have already said, but probably to build on some of all of that, I think you definitely can't go and embark on the data journey, which, as Hrayr said, is expensive, without being really, really clear on what you're getting out of it. What's the business value? And I think it's a bit like a sort of lean startup problem. You need to have that really clear. There will be things you discover along the way. You've got to do some learning, and you need to try and do it in small chunks. But that's not a reason not to do the thinking up front.
Exactly.
Right. So you've got to do that thinking up front. Why are we doing this? Because it's going to be expensive. It's going to take a long time. We're going to change along the way. But have that really clear definition of why, what the business value is, and then test that, like drive exactly towards how do we test that value, which is very much that lean startup idea. So I think that's a good idea if you can do that. Just doing it out of belief in data is a really bad idea. You'll waste a lot of money.
That's a really good point there from James, actually, because I think it's also important to keep like a innovative mindset as well. I think if you're going to invest a lot of money, we've talked about it being expensive. I think I've seen organizations where they've gone down, invested a year or 2 years into building something or going down a certain road, and the value is decreasing. They're not seeing the value that they intended, but because of that substantial commitment, they're thinking we must now continue down this road. And I think if you have that innovation at the back of your mind saying, okay, let's try something, let's experiment, maybe it won't work, and not being afraid to be like, okay, we've made a mistake here, and actually pivot and change is really important. And I think that ties into the earlier point around roles, that kind of decision to change and be like, this is not we've gone down the wrong road, the journey needs to adapt, it needs to change. That probably does need to come from someone high level in the C-suite to take that on, because that's going to be a difficult conversation, especially when the investment is costly.
Really good.
Can I throw one other thing in? Because it's just not come up. And I think this has come up in every customer I've worked on with data.
Yeah.
Is what's the difference between data and information? The reason I think this is really interesting is because I've never met a customer who doesn't think they do information management already. And in a lot of customers, it's a really mature area. Like they've got loads of processes and policies relating to this, keeping their information safe, keeping it secure. And actually, I don't think there is any difference for almost every single useful thing you need to do. There's no meaningful difference between data and information.
Yeah.
There's a difference in terms of how you use it and when through the life cycle. And there's a difference in terms of how structured it is, unstructured, semi-structured, fully structured. But there isn't really any difference in terms of all the stuff we've talked about and the need to understand what the value is to your business, who makes the decisions around it, end users, caring about it, all these different sorts of things. There's no difference at all. So I just think it's probably one for a future podcast, but there's so much in this because people always understand the value of the documents they work with, and typically most organisations are still more document-centric than data-centric. The only difference is how much structure these things have.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Historically, I feel data's kind of been something that's been a number or quantifiable. And through the introduction or awareness of sort of AI and LLMs, unstructured data is basically the information
that sometimes
that you would refer to as information previously, and now it's unstructured data.
And AI makes it easier for us to turn unstructured data back into structured data and back again, both directions.
So I can see definitely the transition more recently into, information being encapsulated into sort of data, which is really good, because then I think it gets the ownership awareness and the care that it needs to become a useful asset, if you want.
And the more we sort of go along this journey of using data to have greater impact on our organisations, the more important it is to manage it properly and see it as an asset. So probably bring it back round to these points that we talked about earlier on in the conversation. There isn't really a difference between your data and your information assets. They're all just data assets, and they're all vital to the success of your business. And so all the things we've just talked about, they apply to all those forms of information.
Yeah, really good. And that's how you get an intelligent enterprise, right? There's the answer.
Manage your data as valuable assets.
Right, thank you very much. We've had some really stimulating conversation. Just want to throw it back to the guys here, the experts. What would you like to talk about next time? We'll start with Hrayr.
Yeah, I think the topic that we discussed yesterday in our executive breakfast was really, really engaging. So 2 hours, it was just kind of in no time. And the topic was around what does data marketplace mean to enterprises, and mainly from kind of internal point of view. So we know about external data marketplaces where some organizations that are more kind of data first organizations, they sell their data assets as part of their offering. But what does it mean for internal, and is it kind of a journey to go for, and maybe a success factor as well, thinking around building up your data marketplaces? And then it brings back to the same conversation, what goes into marketplace, how you manage marketplace, how you declutter your marketplace, all this stuff. So that topic to me is quite interesting, and something that I'm exploring quite heavily last couple of months.
Cool. James, where next?
I think for me, it would be great to follow up on this whole how do you get data owned by the business conversation, and establish that really strong business-owned, business-led data strategy. A big topic within that's data governance, and how you get that really good quality conversation on the value of data as an asset owned by the business. That's, I think, what I'd like to follow up on.
Good. And Lara?
From my side, I would say, how do you go from your quick wins to long-term strategy? And I think that gap in between is kind of that no man's land, bit scary area. So I'd like to delve into how to actually build a strategy and maintain buy-in or increase buy-in and excitement throughout the years.
Cool. So thanks very much. First of all, to Hrayr, James and Lara, for an exciting conversation. Plenty more food for thought, and hopefully we'll be bringing more of these to you. Thanks for tuning in to our FSP podcast.